Welcome back, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We will now begin our session for this afternoon on Thematic Panel Discussion 3, Strengthening Global Regional South-South Cooperation. The moderator of this thematic panel discussion is Ms. Zeynep Orhun Girard, Chief of the Capacity Development and Partnership Section, Strategy and Program Management Division of the United Nations ESCAP.
Okay, good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to the third panel session of this high-level conference of the middle-income countries that is graciously hosted by the government of the Philippines. Our session this afternoon will focus on strengthening global and regional South-South cooperation, and it is both a pleasure and an honor for me to moderate today's session with a lineup of distinguished speakers who are experienced development practitioners as well as thought leaders in the very topical area of South-South cooperation. For ESCAP, being a United Nations Regional Commission, South-South and triangular cooperation is simply the core modality of delivering on our mandates, which are embodied in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Similarly, for many countries around the world, South-South cooperation is certainly not a new phenomenon. What is of increasing relevance for international development cooperation, however, is the changing role and the positioning of countries that had traditionally been only recipients of official development assistance, or ODA, as also technical assistance providers and development partners in their own right. The common point among these countries is that they all fall in the middle income category. To unpack the past, the present, and the future of South-South cooperation, I'm joined by a panel of 5 distinguished speakers whom I'll introduce to you very, very shortly. But before that, please allow me to kindly invite His Excellency, Mr. Omar Hilale, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the Kingdom of Morocco to the United Nations in New York, and the current President of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, to deliver the opening remarks for this session. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to address this panel in my capacity of the President of High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, with focus on how to reinforce global and regional South-South cooperation among and with middle-income countries. As you are aware, MICs are home to the majority of the world population and play a central role in advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Yet, their efforts are often constrained by stricter barriers such as a limited access to concessional finance, outdated classification system based solely on GDP, and insufficient global recognition of their diverse vulnerabilities. These constraints restrict fiscal space, hinder investment in sustainable infrastructure, and limit their ability to respond to complex, multidimensional crises. Furthermore, many MICs also find themselves stuck in the middle-income trap, unable to transition to high-income status while struggling to maintain inclusive and sustainable growth. This trap is often characterized by stagnation productivity, weak diversification, dependence on committees, limited technological innovation, and declining competitiveness. Without adequate support and targeted cooperation, many MICs risk remaining in this development limbo. To qualify for international assistance, but too vulnerable to achieve sustainable progress alone. Hence, there is crucial need for revamping the international development cooperation with mixed to make more comprehensive and more inclusive. Also, the international community must make full use of key opportunities in 2025, including the upcoming 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, FFD4, to drive transformative changes for mix. This includes addressing systemic gaps in global financial architecture, ensuring fair access to development financing, and advancing inclusive solutions that enable mix to invest in long-term resilience and structural transformation. South-South cooperation provides an important and complementary platform to North-South cooperation to address systemic challenges through solidarity-based partnerships, practical collaboration, and shared innovation. It empowers mix to exchange context-specific solutions, co-develop policy instruments, and mobilize resources aligned with their national priorities. At the same time, mix are not only recipients, but also active contributors to South-South cooperation. They are supporting one another through regional integration initiatives, peer learning platforms, financial support, and technical exchange. Many mix are also extending solidarity to least developed countries and lower income countries, sharing expertise in areas such as digital innovation, climate adaptation, health systems, and social protections. These efforts reflect the core principles of South-South cooperation and reaffirm the role of mix as both drivers and enablers of sustainable development across Global South, despite the pressing and specific challenges they continue to face. I would like now to draw a matrix on how South-South cooperation could give practical solutions for boosting mixed development and growth. First, middle-income countries are managing high debt levels while at the same time needing climate action and structural transformation. In this context, South-South cooperation can help us success practical financial solutions, such as debt for climate and debt for SDG swap and sustainability-linked bonds. MICS can jointly develop and replicate these innovative financing tools that reduce debt burdens while investing in shared priorities, including biodiversity, conservation, and resilient infrastructures. Two, MICS can also leverage South-South cooperation to collaborative design and implement integrated national financing framework, which is a critical mechanism for aligning national development plans with their diverse source of financing. Through South-South cooperation, countries can co-develop an EINFF models adapted to their specific fiscal realities and establish peer learning platforms for ministries of finance and planning. Three, with growing climate risks and sustainability demands, MICS are indeed in need to access long-term, predictable financing aligned with SDGs. South-South cooperation can support the creation of dedicated South-South climate finance, innovation funds to pilot blended, concessional and non-debt creating financial instruments. Four, sustainable production and consumption are central to long-term growth and environmental stewardship. Through South-South cooperation, MICS can create circular economy roadmaps, scale up green industrial strategies, and share tools for natural capital accounting and ecosystem evaluations. 5, in the digital economy space, access to digital infrastructure and innovation capacity is critical for inclusive development. South-South cooperation offers opportunities to countries to leverage regional digital cooperation hubs, facilitating access to open source technologies, digital public goods, and shared platforms for mix can also strengthen capacities in cybersecurity, data governance, and digital entrepreneurship, enabling more inclusive participation in global digital value chains. 6, last but not least, many MICs remain constrained by the global reliance on GDP per capita as a dominant measures of development progress and eligibility for support, hence the urgency and importance of informed metrics that more accurately capture the realities on the ground. Through South-South cooperation, MICs can lead effort to operationalize the Beyond GDP agenda by co-developing a value dashboard of complementarity capacities at national and regional levels. We can also collaborate to reform data systems, to reflect informal work, unpaid care, environment, and resilience, ensuring that development cooperation and financing are based on real needs, not outdated classifications. Finally, dear participants, as President of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, I am committed to supporting MICs in transforming these priorities into actions. I will work with the United Nations Office on South-South Cooperation along with relevant partners to first convene a high-level dialogue on South-South cooperation for MICs, bringing together government, multilateral development banks, private sector, think tanks, and the UN development system to identify evolving priorities that reflect the current context, share scalable as South-South cooperation practices, and advocate for reforms in development cooperation. 2, promote the establishment of a dedicated South-South financing facility for MICs, focused on non-debiting resources, digital and green transitions, and innovative partnerships with the engagement and partnerships with multilateral development banks, IFS, and the private sector. And 3, promote knowledge exchange on efforts related to Beyond GDP frameworks and international financial funds implementation, supporting countries to exchange knowledge and information and capacities needed to operationalize them across policy and financial cycles. South-South cooperation is not just a modality, it is a movement of solidarity and key to unlocking MICs potential and addressing the structural gaps. Through South-South cooperation, MICs can lead a new era of development cooperation, one that values what counts, finances what matters, and leaves no country behind.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is it working now? Sorry about that. Thank you, Your Excellency, for setting the scene for our panel discussion. So we will now kick off our panel discussion, which will take place in 2 rounds, and I'll endeavor to stop in between the 2 rounds and after the second round for interventions from the floor. So please do note your questions and comments as the discussion unrolls on this stage. Before we start, let me quickly introduce everyone. Immediately to my left is Ibu Rina Setiawati. She's the Director of International Development Cooperation from the Ministry of the Republic of Indonesia. Ibu Rina has over 20 years as a career diplomat in multilateral affairs, and she has previously served in Geneva, New York, and the Mauritius. Welcome, Ibu Rina. Next, we have Kun Aruni Hayam from Thailand. She's the Deputy Director of Thailand International Cooperation Agency. And Kun Aruni is a true champion of South-South and triangular cooperation in the region and beyond. And she has over 30 years experience with TICA and she's held several key management positions in this institution. Welcome, Kun Aruni. Next to Kun Aruni is His Excellency Mr. Arkan Aristanov, Chairman of the Board of Kazakhstan Agency of International Development, or better known as KAZAID. Mr. Aristanov, prior to his current role, has served as ambassador of the Republic of Kazakhstan in several countries and has also worked in financial, corporate, and public sectors. Welcome, Mr. Aristanov. Next, we have joining us today Mr. Ibrahim Katırcı. He's the Philippines Program Coordinator of the Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, or TICA, not to be confused with TICA of Thailand. And Mr. Katırcı has been with TICA for over a decade and has previously served in Niger and Pakistan. And finally, I warmly welcome Ms. Dima Al-Hatib, the Director of United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation based in New York. Ms. Al-Hatib has also nearly 30 years experience in the UN system, and she's served in many, many countries, including Moldova, where she was the UNDP resident representative. Welcome to all of you. And we will start with the first round, which will focus on the unique role of middle-income countries in changing development landscape. So my first question will go to Ibu Rina. Ibu Rina, as you know, Indonesia has long played a prominent role in shaping the foundations of South-South cooperation, most notably through the 1955 Bandung Conference, of which we're commemorating the 70th anniversary this year. And building on this legacy, Indonesia has developed, became a G20 member, and is now a key regional actor that continues to assert its leadership as both a recipient and provider of development assistance, particularly among emerging development partners. So the question is, with the changing priorities of traditional donors and the recent reductions in ODA that we're hearing every day, do you think South-South cooperation can fill the gap? And how should mixed or middle-income countries position themselves in the next 5 to 10 years for development cooperation?
Thank you, Zainab. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a great honor for me to represent Indonesia in this very important meeting. So to answer your first questions, Zainab, can social and triangular cooperation fill the gap? I think middle-income countries today stand at a critical inflection point in shaping global development cooperations. We are witnessing a proven shift whereby traditional development financing, including ODA, is declining, yet the challenges that we face continue to intensify. So I think it is important to underline the importance of multilateralism and international order for middle-income countries. Again, in this backdrop, I believe that South-South and triangular cooperation can no longer be viewed as complementary or supplementary. It is now the strategic pillar of global development cooperations. So South-South cooperations offers more than financial alternatives. It offers something more enduring, like Ambassador Hilale mentioned before, solidarity, shared ownership, and a context-specific solution. And as for now, we have to work harder to increase our funding for South-South and triangular cooperation to fill that gap, Zainab, left by declining ODA from developed countries. However, for Indonesia, South-South and triangular cooperation is not a simple mechanism. It is a transformative approach to create solution among partners who understand one realities. And as you mentioned before, our journey exemplifies this transformation from our foundation role in 1955 Bandung Conference to our current positions. So we have taken deliberate steps to evolve from recipient to the trusted provider and partners. And through Indonesian aid that we established in 2019, we have delivered grants to developing countries from Asia, Africa, and also Pacific. And our approach is remain consistent. It's always demand-driven because and we focus on area where Indonesia has tested expertise. And for your second questions, how should we see MICs in the next 5 and 10 years? Well, looking ahead, I believe that MICs must be co-architect of future development landscape. And I see at least 3 things that we need to do. First, leverage South-South triangular cooperation to strengthen regional ecosystem cooperations. Yeah, the UN Desa World Population Prospect project that MIC will account for over 70% of the world population. So MIC led regional platforms such as ASEAN, Mercosur, and also African Union can serve as a vehicle to deliver context-relevant solutions. And the second that the MIC need to do is invest in knowledge co-creations. So it should be cooperation beyond technical assistance. And the third that MIC need to do is reform global development governance. So MIC, who shoulder growing responsibility, also have a voice in shaping priorities and also norms. Despite their growing economic and demographic weight of MICs, I think MIC remained underrepresented in global decision making. So therefore, over the next decade, we must reform development finance framework, mobilize innovative funding sources, and most importantly, to ensure that MIC have an equal seat at the table in shaping norms, standard, and also cooperation modalities.
Thank you, Iburina, for those really visionary remarks. You called South-South cooperation the strategic plan for development cooperation. That's, I think, going to stick with many of us here. Thank you for those remarks. I'll now move to Kun Aruni from TAICA. Kun Aruni, Thailand has been at the forefront of MIC-led development cooperation, with TAICA serving as one of the earliest institutionalized models of cooperation in the region. Thailand has supported countries through technical assistance, capacity building, as well as regional collaboration. Drawing on this experience, what is your advice for middle-income countries that are interested in setting up their own development cooperation outfits or full-fledged agencies? And what kind of support could Thailand provide them, as well as other emerging development partners? Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Kusinet. First of all, I would like to thank the government of the Philippines, ESCAP, and other UN agencies for this opportunity to share Thailand's experience here today. MICs today, as we know, are playing an increasing vital role in the global partnership landscape. In the evolving context, we are not, today I would like to share some of the reflection on the MICs interested in setting up their own development cooperation agencies, as well as to share how Thailand, through my office, Thailand International Cooperation Agency, stand ready to support the aspiring development partners. For the MIC who wish to establish the International Development Cooperation Agencies, I think we have 4 crucial elements that need to be considered. First is the political will. It is a foundation for the long-term commitment and very credibility. Second is a clear structure or the system for the turning political will into the policy and practical mechanisms. The third is the sustainable budget. Without the adequate funding, the implementation becomes fragmented and unsustained. Fourth is a national contribution or our expertise. The MIC must define the add value or our good practice models in a development partnership. To elaborate what I mentioned, I would like to share Thailand's experience. In the early 2000s, as Thailand transitioned to an upper middle income status, our leadership recognized the need to reposition the country from an aid recipient to an emerging provider. This political view led to the establishment of the Thailand International Cooperation Agency, or TICA, under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. TICA became the focal point for our international development cooperation efforts, with the focus on the South-South and Triangular cooperation. Our cooperation emphasizes on the technical assistance through the training programs, long-term scholarships, projects in the key sectors such as agriculture, health, education, and climate resilience. We are guided by our homegrown approach, such as sufficiency economy philosophy and the biocircular green economy model, which prioritize sustainability, balance, and resilience, as well as the core for development. Through triangular cooperation, Thailand works closely with both traditional donors and other developing countries, serving as a bridge between the global North and the global South. We offer practical incentives such as shared funding, technical expertise, and logical support to strengthen this collaboration. So Thailand, through TICA, is ready to support an aspiring development partner in several key issues that you asked for example, with the structure and transparent system. We have developed institutional frameworks that promote accountability, transparency, and result-based management, building trust among our stakeholders. Capacity development and technical expertise. Drawing on the decades of the experience, Thailand offers customized training, scholarships, deployment of experts and Thai volunteers, and support the local driven project in the key sectors. The next one is the sharing success story and good practices. We are happy to share models like SAP that I mentioned and BCG to inspire co-creation solution in the different countries. Facilitation and co-implementation. For partners without established the agency yet, Thailand is open to co-developing or co-implementing the project under the South-South and Triangular cooperation, grounded in a mutual respect and a demand-driven approach. So on the other hand, I also would like to mention some of the key challenges that MICs may face. First is the competing national priority, limited institutional capacity, and the balancing of the domestic and international commitment are some of the real concerns that can constrain development cooperation agenda. But our MICs bring the unique perspectives of having been both recipient and providers. We understand the importance of the locally owned, nationally driven, and globally connected development. So I would like to conclude on this session that Thailand stands ready to collaborate, exchange ideas, and join create inclusive, effective, and sustainable development pathways with our MIC friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Kunaruni, for those remarks and for asserting and confirming Thailand's readiness to support other middle-income countries in their development cooperation journey. And you've also spoke about the strengths as well as the challenges of middle-income countries. So just because middle-income countries are also providers, it doesn't mean that they don't face other challenges where they may need help from others, right? Thank you for that. And going from an earlier development cooperation agency among middle-income countries, we'll go to one of the newest ones. KAZAID was established very recently. And as a relatively new development agency, Mr. Arstanov, how is KAZAID navigating the challenge of defining Kazakhstan's niche in the development cooperation ecosystem among countries of the South? And how does KAZAID define success? Thank you.
Thank you. Ras. Yes. Thank you for the question, Dinep. And yes, this year we celebrate 5 years of forming of KAZAID. And because we are a new agency, so we have the all experience of developed countries and such agencies like TICA, TAICA, Indonesian Aid, and others. And that is why we understand that we cannot introduce something new. But we must define what's the additional value we can provide for the technical cooperation, for the South-South cooperation. And analyzing the development of South-South cooperation, we understand that the country, recipient country, must, first of all, must understand what they are looking for. For instance, we propose our assistance to one country, and they ask us to construct a plant, to construct a ministry building, to construct a hospital, and then we ask them, okay, we will construct, but what you will do? And we didn't understand, for instance, this country has lack of medical services, but at the same time they have more students from the medical college educated and not working as on specialty, because they are working in the hotels, in other jobs, but not in the medical specialty. So we understand that the country must understand what's the real need, and probably together we can help them how to manage this issue. And in the morning session, it was discussed that it is necessary to have coordination. It is necessary to have a real plan and to define the real problem. Because in nowadays, with geopolitical situation, the developed countries are cutting their official development assistance and more concentrated on other problems. So I think that middle-income countries must take the responsibility for their own development and to lead the South-South cooperation. And in this area, we, from the beginning, signed the memorandums of understanding and started to create connectivity with other agencies, not only with from the global north, but also from the south, like we signed the agreement with TICA. Now we are discussing the agreements with TAICA and Indonesian Aid. Also, we are in negotiations with Brazilian ABC. This year we will have a meeting in Colombia, and we will discuss how the emerging developing partners can be cooperate in order to achieve the real success. I can show one example. The Kazakh company went to Cambodia, and they create a small bank. And after 3 years, this bank becomes #1 in Cambodia. And the Kazakh company sell it to Canadian bank. And the Canadian bank ask the management from Kazakhstan to keep in place in order to conduct the business. It means that we face this problem and we know how to reform banking system. And the Canadian specialists know this, but from the books, because they have such problem 100 years ago. But we have this problem just 10 years ago. So we know how to manage, how to understand the mentality, psychology of the clients, how to develop consumer credits and so on. That is why it is necessary to combine the synergy between the agencies and between the teams. And the main idea now, I think it's create projects as smart, small, and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arslanov, for outlining Kazakh strategy in engaging with partners. My next question will go to Tika, to Mr. Katırcı, and there I'll go straight into the question. How does Tika tailor its approach when working with middle-income countries, particularly in aligning priorities and distinguishing its role from traditional donors? And what is unique about Tika's development cooperation model, and where has it had the strongest impact? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Girard. To start with, Turkey's development cooperation, led by the Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, TICA, is fundamentally grounded in the principles of solidarity, partnership, and mutual benefit. As both a middle-income country and founding member of OECD, Turkey uniquely bridges the gap between North-South and South-South cooperation models. This distinctive position enables Turkey and TICA to understand and address the complexities involved in international development from multiple perspectives. One of the TICA's most defining characteristics is its emphasis on horizontal partnerships rather than traditional donor-recipient dynamics. When working with other MICs, TICA prioritizes demand-driven and context-specific programs. This approach respects and supports local ownership, enhancing both the relevance and the sustainability of the outcomes achieved. Technical cooperation forms the backbone of TICA's engagement model. Turkey relies on its own extensive experiences to provide practical and proven solutions. Our technical cooperation encompasses critical sectors, including health, education, agriculture, and institutional capacity building. By sharing Turkey's lessons learned, both success and challenges, we facilitate genuine knowledge exchanges that empower our partner countries. In Southeast Asia, TICA's impact is particularly visible due to our strategic focus on cultural affinity, mutual respect, and adaptability. For instance, our health sector programs in countries like the Philippines, Bangladesh, and Indonesia have demonstrated measurable outcomes through initiatives such as medical training programs, hospital infrastructure improvements, and equipment donations. Vocational education and support for small and medium-sized enterprises represent another area of improvement. By closely aligning with partner countries' economic growth objectives, TICA vocational training projects foster job creation, entrepreneurship, and economic resilience. These programs have a tangible impact, such as enhancing workforce skills, boosting local economies through empowered small-medium enterprises, ultimately contributing to inclusive economic growth. TICA also believes firmly in promoting visibility and the leadership of local actors. Instead of imposing external solutions, our approach is to empower local institutions and communities, reinforcing their capacities and highlighting their roles as the key drivers of their own development journeys. By fostering local leadership, we not only ensure immediate success, but also lay the groundwork for sustained progress and self-sufficiency. In conclusion, TICA's greatest impact lies in an adaptable, responsive, and culturally sensitive partnership model. Building on Turkey's unique development journey and experiences, we facilitate authentic knowledge exchanges and deliver practical solutions. Our successes in MICs particularly highlight the value of solidarity-based cooperation, built on shared experiences, mutual understanding, and respect. This philosophy resonates deeply with our partners across the Global South, solidifying Turkey's role as an innovative and empathic actor in international development cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you for those remarks. I think from your horizontal partnerships or partnerships on equal footing, And some of the impacts that you shared from Tika's work are ranging from health to education and economic programs as well. Thank you. I will now move to Dima, who's heading UNOSC, which is, of course, UN System's focal point for South-South cooperation and the vanguard of South-South and triangular cooperation for all of us. How is UNOSC helping, Dima, to position middle-income countries as knowledge providers, innovators, or in other capacities within global South-South cooperation landscape?
Works. Thank you, Zainab. Thank you for this question. And it was really enlightening to also listen to the colleagues and see how South-South cooperation and triangle cooperation is being institutionalized at the level of the countries. And this is something to be very proud of. And I think this is the way forward also to bring, South-South and triangle cooperation to a different height. Now, going back to your question, and also based on the different interventions that were discussed this morning, highlighting the specificities of the middle-income countries, their challenges, their in numbers, but also diving into some thematics. I think it all also gives us also an opportunity to say how much potential there is in the middle-income countries, not only in terms of the knowledge that they can provide, the tester house of generation of knowledge, of solutions, and innovations. And we, as the Office of UN Office for South-South Cooperation, and as per our mandate to advocate, to facilitate, and to enable South-South and triangle cooperation by working closely with the member states and by working closely with the UN system at large, our focus is to, specifically also for the middle-income countries, first and foremost is to amplify the voice. And this is through the high-level forums that we get engaged in, but also the high-level committee on South-South cooperation. And I think the plan that was highlighted by His Excellency Ambassador Hilali paves the way for an action-oriented plan that we will hopefully work together to make sure that the middle-income countries' interests and voice gets amplified via the high-level committee. But also, the work entails working also on intergovernmental processes, being part of those agenda-setting forums, ensuring that South-South cooperation and triangle cooperation is anchored also in all of those thematics that pertain to the countries. The other aspect of our work, which is delving deeper also into the problematics of the middle-income countries, provides evidence in terms of advocacy, but also bringing forward evidence to those challenges towards addressing them in concrete solutions. That is very important. And to also bring those solutions on digital platforms that we maintain, such as the South-South Galaxy. And through the Galaxy also, we have recently initiated what we call the South-South and Triangular Solutions Lab, which is more targeted towards providing solutions to all country typologies, but middle-income countries are the highest numbers of countries in the Global South, so they are indirectly the biggest beneficiary of such platforms. The third element is, of course, providing catalytic financing to be able to showcase and illustrate how, through such financing, South-South and Triangle cooperation is being able to bridge a gap and to advance and to complement the traditional and the usual ways of doing development cooperation. And this is thanks to the collaboration of countries from the South that we are able to do that, whether through the India-UN Partnership Fund, or through the India-Brazil and South Africa Fund, or whether through the Triangle Cooperation Window that we have recently initiated, and the collaboration with several countries, technology and innovation. All of these funds are to support. These are funding coming from the South to the South, and also making good use of the expertise of the South, but also making good use of the multilateral system. And here I want to really underline the role of the UN system at the countries and the regional level, which is extremely important, because the UN system provides invaluable technical expertise that is at the service of all the countries, and they need to make good use of that. We are providing instruments and tools that support the UN system and the beneficiary countries in advancing South-South, and that becomes part of the partnership strategy and not to be looked at separately. I believe that through full integration, this becomes more organic and more advanced. So recently, actually a year ago, we have launched what we call the UNCT guidelines for South-South and Triangle cooperation. And a few months ago, we have launched an e-module together with the UN Staff College to also enable all the practitioners to be able to use it, whether in the common country analysis or the development of the country project documents, in consultations with the respective governments where they operate. I think this is a gamut of multidimensional support that we are keen on keeping on advancing, but also work closely with the different, again, the UN system, which has the technical expertise also to support the countries, in their pathway to achieve these challenges.
Thank you, Dima, for outlining UNOSC's support both within the UN system and outside the UN system. And I think it's important to note, as Iborina was referring to, the changes that are needed in the global system. UNOSC is one of the enablers for South-South cooperation as well as middle-income countries to position themselves and build consensus around priorities. Thank you for that. I promised at the beginning that I would open the floor for interventions. So I think we can take one. I see a gentleman in front from Ecuador. I need to wear my glasses. Can we have a microphone, please? Otherwise.
Hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we
there
can
you
hear
go.
you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and thank you to all the panelists for their very, very informative briefings. Ecuador definitely believes that the South-South and triangular cooperation are essential pillars for achieving a more equitable and resilient development, particularly among middle-income countries. On this line, I would like to ask a question to Madame Dima. While there are important steps that have been taken to measure South-South cooperation activities, how can the UN development system and member states strengthen methodologies to measure the real impact of South-South and triangular initiatives? Thank you.
Very good question. As you know, in the UN system, UNCTAD is a co-chair and leading a very important exercise on the measurement of South-South and triangular cooperation. I think it is being piloted in few countries, mostly in Latin America. I think there are several events that have been capturing this, and we're more than happy to share with you more details about that. But what I would like to mention in this measurement process is that this is not a very easy and straightforward process. First of all, a lot of the South-South and triangular cooperation is being done without being labeled as such. right? Whether it is support from, among countries, or whether it's also support that is being received from other countries. So it goes sometimes underreported. Even to the OECD, it is also underreported. This is one of the challenges also in terms of measuring triangular cooperation. Second, when we talk about South-South and triangular cooperation, there are things that are measured in terms of quantity as flows of support, flows in terms of financial flows, but there are also qualitative elements in terms of capacity building, peer-to-peer learning. I mean, we have to put criteria. There should be some criteria to be able to measure that in accurate terms. And that becomes a little bit more challenging, right? And the third element, and what is important in all of this, now this is being tested in countries where South-South and triangular cooperation is quite institutionalized. What we would like to encourage is the institutionalization of South-South and triangle cooperation across countries. So it doesn't become a topic on the side or an add-on, right? When you have institutions, then things become...
promote more inclusive and regionally embedded multi-stakeholder cooperation in the Global South. So not just to have cooperation between governments, but also to involve other stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. First, let me turn to the importance of forging more inclusive and regionally embedded partnership. Indonesia strongly believes that effective development cooperation must be inclusive by design. So it means involving not only government, but also civil society, local government, academia, and even private sectors. And we are really committed to this approach through continuous engagement with multilateral and bilateral partners, as well as through regional mechanisms to ensure that cooperation is not only systematic but also result-oriented. And at the regional level, we work with many regional organizations. We work closely with ASEAN, Pacific Island Forums, and also Indian Ocean Rim Associations. And as part of our broader economic and regional diplomacy, I'm pleased to inform that we've been working closely with TICA. Currently, we are working on the action plan, and also with TICA, we have MOU as well. And we are aiming to expand this mutual learning and support in areas in such as agriculture, education, and also health. And looking ahead, we are actively promoting new partnership with other partners. Currently, Indonesia is in the process, is forging cooperation with KZ. And we also believe that middle-income countries must move beyond the collaboration, but also invest in long-term alliances. Therefore, we initiated the Emerging Development Partners platform last year. So this EDP has two clear purposes. First is to unite developing countries in a concerted actions to enhance our contribution to global growth, and the second is to strengthen our bargaining position on the international stage. And this EDP initiative, alongside with regional partners, serve as space for peer exchange and also to deliver high-impact program in many aspects. And as we look for future, I do believe that innovation will be the cornerstones of impactful South-South and triangular cooperations. So we must embrace digital transformation and also invest in South-led research network. Zainab.
Thank you, Ibrina, and thanks for mentioning the Emerging Development Partners Network. I think that's going to generate some interest among the countries here. With that, I'll segue into the question for Kun Aruni, because this question actually focuses on how TICA has been leveraging regional mechanisms, and how is actually TICA using regional platforms to strengthen precisely cooperation among middle-income countries and to foster coordination as well.
Thank you, Kun Zainab. Actually, Thailand, I think we have a same belief with Indonesia and other agencies here that the power of the regional cooperation as a driving force of the sustainable development. We see the regional platform through the South-South and triangular cooperation as essential in building bridge between the MICs. We approach this through the lens of the cooperation in Thailand, with Thailand, and for Thailand. Through this approach, we aim to build the security and resilience and to ensure that the partnerships are meaningful and sustainable, not only externally, but also our domestic stakeholders, as well as to contribute the regional community where knowledge flow freely. Partnerships are equitable and solutions are locally driven and regional supported. Let me explain what this means in practice. First, the cooperation in Thailand. As a regional learning hub, Thailand hosts various development cooperation activities within the country, where partner countries are invited to participate in training programs, long-term scholarships, study visits, as well as joint workshops. These activities take place in the real communities, setting using Thailand's own development sites as a living learning centers, and also highlight the local innovations and the practical solutions developed through Thailand's own development pathway, and encourage peer learning among MICs who face similar development challenges with Thailand. For example, to our annual international training courses, from the participants from the MICs come to Thailand to learn directly from our practitioners, experts, and grassroots leaders. This creates a space for shared learning and co-creation solutions. Second is a cooperation with Thailand. As committed as a regional partner, Thailand actively engaged in the regional platforms, ASEAN, BIMSTEC, and ESCAP, to name a few, to strengthen MIC to MIC collaboration through, for example, the platform. We co-developed regional projects that respond to shared priorities such as food security, climate resilience, and public health. Engage in the triangular cooperation with the regional and global partners to support initiatives and benefit other MICs. Also share policy dialogues and best practices on how to institutionalize development cooperation at the regional level. TICA also serves as a facilitator for the regional partnerships, encouraging joint ownership and promoting the role of the MICs, not only as a beneficiaries, but also as a solution providers. The third one is a cooperation for Thailand to ensure the mutual benefit and national relevance. While we are committed to supporting others, our cooperation must also generate benefits for our people by strengthening regional stability and prosperity with a directly affect our people interests in the form of people-to-people connectivity, creating opportunities for Thai institutions to expand their international outreach and capacity, encouraging innovation and cross-cultural exchange that enrich our sustainable development goals by designing cooperation that is rooted in the mutual respect and co-benefit. Once again, we welcome all the MICs to collaborate with us to create an inclusive and collaborative solution, and so we can move forward together as a partner in progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Khun Aruni. I will go straight to Mr. Aristanov and ask a related question, because Kazakhstan is also very much engaged in regional organizations, hosts some regional organizations, and has increasingly positioned itself as a connector in the region. But building on this regional experience, does KAZAID have a vision for itself as a bridge builder among middle-income countries and emerging development partners more globally?
Yes, and as I told you before, Kazakhstan as a middle-income country and recently recognized as a middle power, take the responsibility to increase the ODA for the 0.2 of GNI, like recommended by the United Nations General Assembly. And if we do this, of course, we will have to put at least $100 million every year for this activity. And of course, we would like to create something interesting for the region. And now mostly we are working with the Central Asia and Afghanistan. But recently we started our activity in Africa. So we provide our digital solution of e-government to such countries like Sierra Leone, Togo, Kenya, and Afghanistan. And in such international regional organizations like, for instance, Islamic Organization of Food Security, we're working together with our colleagues from TICA to organize some project to help farmers in Afghanistan. Also, we have such agency in Azerbaijan, and in coming meeting of Organization of Turkish States, we are planning create some activity together with TICA, AIDA, and KAZAID. But also, we invite our colleagues from Indonesia and Thailand to promote some projects in Central Asia, for instance, how to improve the statistic in our country, so the Indonesia can help us and share the experience in this area. Thailand is very advanced in agriculture technologies, innovations technologies, and organizing such projects, we learn from each other, even from the legal aspects, how to coordinate, how to connect, how to elaborate the project. For instance, now we are preparing the project for Kyrgyzstan together with TICA about the project management. And so many questions arise. And we are solving together, and we know each other from the project, and we create the connectivity between the agencies, and I think this is very, very important.
Thank you. Thank you for those remarks. Thank you for telling us that KAZAID is already acting globally, already present in several regions in the world, and also pointing to this institutional support that different development partners provide to each other in operations and in actually setting up the system of development cooperation agencies. So next, I will go to TICA, and of course, TICA has a model of decentralization and working with local governments and communities. So based on this experience, what innovative partnership models has TICA developed, actually with traditional donors and private sectors, sector companies, especially taking into account your experience with your partners at the local level and community level?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Girard. One of the main advantages of TICA's development cooperation model is decentralized structure and strong emphasis on local ownership. This allows us to build responsive and culturally sensitive partnership at every stage of cooperation. Recently, we have expanded our approach by adopting innovative hybrid models, actively collaborating with traditional donors, international organizations, and the private sector. An excellent example of such innovation is what we call the complementary cooperation model. In this approach, Turkey collaborates with traditional donor countries, not as a junior partner or competitor, but as an equal participant. For instance, we have successfully partnered with the Japan International Cooperation Agency in third country cooperation programs, particularly in the Balkans and Central Asia. Here, Turkey and Japan jointly plan, finance, and implement projects, each side contributing their strengths and expertise. This triangular cooperation model has proven highly effective, respecting local leadership, promoting mutual learning, and enabling all parties to benefit from shared expertise. Beyond collaboration with traditional donors, TIC also actively involves the private sector as a strategic development partner. We have worked closely with Turkish companies as well as the local businesses in our partner countries to facilitate technology transfer, vocational education, and the growth of small and medium-sized enterprises. For example, in Africa and Southeast Asia, our vocational training centers partner directly with private companies. Together, we design and deliver training programs, aligned with the market demands and the national employment strategies. Such partnerships ensure sustainable results by bridging gaps between the public policy goals and the private sector needs. A unique aspect of these partnerships is TICA's role as a facilitator. Rather than merely providing funds or technical assistance, we actively promote inclusive dialogue among government agencies, corporate actor, and civil society organizations. Our flexible structure allows us to build trust-based relationships quickly, creating effective networks for collaboration. This approach is especially valuable for middle-income countries, which often need innovative solutions rather than traditional donor-driven interventions. To summarize, based on our experiences, middle-income countries looking to enhance their development cooperation strategies can particularly benefit from TICA's innovations, including focusing on co-creation, equal partnership, rather than conditional aid, promoting multi-actor implementation platforms, where government, private sector, and civil society collaborate, leveraging hybrid financing models that blend resources from public, private, and donor sectors. Overall, these partnership models illustrate how South-South and triangular cooperation can lead to more responsive, balanced, and sustainable development outcomes, ultimately driven by solidarity, mutual respect, and shared priorities. Thank you.
Thank you for those interventions. Dima, having heard from the countries and the different kinds of partnerships they're forging at the national level, regional level, and global level, moving forward, what plans does UNOSC have to further strengthen South-South partnerships among various multi-stakeholder environments? So different stakeholders, not only governments, but the private sector, academia, and so forth.
Thank you, Zainab. In addition to what I had mentioned before, there will be, from our side, from the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, more focus on the issues that are really, that need immediate support, such as the issues of the debt distress, the financial support to countries, not in terms of us providing that, but to try to address those issues through policy dialogues, bringing also best practices, peer-to-peer learning, and in addition to that, working with the what we call the global thinkers, and these are all the think tanks that we are identifying at the levels of the regions to be able to generate knowledge within countries, within regions, to support or influence, if you will, the policy making. Previous panels have talked about the policy coherence. All of that requires really a better understanding of the realities, and this is where we can definitely contribute to. The other aspect is to also work closely with multilateral development banks in terms of also seeing how can we support in bridging that gap. From what I've been also hearing from different partners and parties is that there are challenges in terms of accessing concessional financing, for example. Is it an issue of negotiation skills? Is it an issue, somebody has mentioned in previous panel, financial literacy? Is it an issue of the ability to develop bankable projects? So there is one element of a skilling or upskilling, if you will, countries that we really need to pay more attention to and try to connect the dots, if you will, from national, even local, national, regional, and make sure that the global agenda is also anchoring all of these elements into the bigger picture.
That's very interesting because you basically emphasize that the capacities or the support that is needed among the countries doesn't always come from other countries, but it could come from other stakeholders, right? So on that note, we have 5 minutes. Yes. Maybe we can take 2 questions if you indulge us. Could we have the microphone to the front row? Maybe here first, to Colombia.
Thank you, and thank you to all the panelists. This is a very enriching conversation, and a subject that for Colombia is a very important subject, and given our traditional triangular cooperation and the things that we're doing in our region and with other partners throughout the world. I want to highlight maybe a couple of comments / questions, one to UN. How do you use the tools that are already present in terms of trans-regional dialogue to boost their cooperation? And that, I can give you an example. We have FEALAC with our region in East Asia, and we share, for example, a committee with Indonesia with sports and culture. We co-share it within FEALAC. But FEALAC sometimes it decreases momentum from time to time, and it passes years, and it's the main dialogue platform between East Asia and Latin America. But it lacks a lot of momentum from time to time because it is earmarked to political willingness, if I may say that phrase. And that was my first question for you, ma'am. How do you use these trans-regional platforms in terms of the UN, and how can UN help these trans-regional platforms? And my second question goes to maybe our partner with Tika and Turkey. How do you work with other countries in regards of your priorities for foreign policy in terms of cooperation? You mentioned several projects in different African countries. Do you share your experience of that cooperation strategy with other countries that want to go also to Africa? Maybe this is the next level of triangular cooperation, maybe not sharing cost, but sharing knowledge of how you went into any African country and did a project that boosted something and gave development. And how do you share knowledge of cooperation with other countries, middle-income countries, such as Colombia or another one, so we can booster together that cooperation framework in terms to go somewhere else? Because sometimes, well, cooperation is also a tool for foreign policy. And maybe the next step, given that we're going to lack resources from now on in many places, is to share how we frame our cooperation, how we do our strategies in terms of specific foreign policy, but we can put that behind because each state has its own, but the strategy, the framework, the way we cooperate with other countries, given our interests, how can we share with middle-income countries that capacity that we have already established in order for all of us have those resources, knowledge, among others, to do good with our cooperation. Those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll be bold and ask to give the microphone to El Salvador because you raise your hands at the same time, and then I'll ask the panelists to answer together. To El Salvador, please, the microphone. Thank you. Here. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you. And thank you to all panelists. It has been a really rich exchange. Just to be brief and maybe a follow-up in terms of some of the issues has been highlighted. I think Ms. Dima was the one raising an issue of which areas are needed to be strengthened in order to leverage more the role of South-South cooperation. So I think if we can ask, having a broad panel of different entities, which other key areas are also relevant to be strengthened. I know financing of platform and mechanism is useful. Also, it has been said how South-South cooperation can be mainstream as another area in which South-South cooperation can be leveraged. But just having in mind the idea of the panel in which countries, as middle-income countries, are moving from this recipient position into a more provider position. So which are the areas that we might consider need to be strengthened to leverage this role that South-South cooperation is having now in the global development cooperation arena? Maybe just to gather some of the inputs from here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question. So I'll start by Tika. So the question was, how do you work with other countries and how do you share your cooperation strategy with other countries, especially considering that development cooperation is very much aligned with foreign policy?
Actually, we have 61 offices all around the world, and we have program coordination offices. Through our offices, we identify the projects, directly working with the partners. Like as I said before, we are like demand-driven cooperation agency, and also the implementing agency. From start to finish, we implement the projects with our collaborators. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Dima, you have a lot of questions, so I'll let you frame them together.
Yes. I think also with little time, one cannot cover everything. But just to answer, how can we use existing tools, especially the ones that are at the level of the countries? We do have, as I mentioned, a knowledge platform, a digital one called Galaxy, which we try to also feature some of the best practices of the countries, in addition to the best practices that gets documented. And we are more than happy to also convene panels of discussions. We have also a network of development cooperation entities that we need to further actually revive to encourage those discussions and sharing of best practices. And in the case of Colombia, Colombia is going to be a partner for our office in terms of triangular cooperation. So that's also another entry point where we can definitely make good use of the expertise and the acumen of knowledge from Colombia to the world. So many entry points, so I hope that we will be able to benefit from Colombia's experience. And in terms of the topics, if I understood you well, so what are some of the topics that could be raised? We do normally, our entry point is what do the member states require as part of the different resolutions, the different action plans. These are the basis for us in terms of setting those topics, but also in terms of direct consultations with the groupings. The office has also direct contacts and provides technical support to the G77 and have direct, collaboration with the different groupings, whether via the high-level committee on South-South, but also the different groupings, whether it's SIDS, via the Abbas, and there is a commitment, for example, to that. The landlocked conference is coming up. We are the ones who are organizing the South-South Cooperation Day for that. The LDCs, there is also a previous commitment and close collaboration with other UN entities and other bureaus, such as the Office of the High Representative of the Least Developed Countries, the landlocked countries, and the SIDS. So there are many avenues where we can derive those priorities that are set by the member states, in addition to consultations. But we also do welcome suggestions and look forward to additional collaborations whenever there is a need for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Dima. On that note, as we're over time, I will close the session. Thank you all for making this a dynamic and engaging one. And please join me in thanking our distinguished panelists with a round of applause. So the conversation will continue over coffee. Thank you.
Thank you once again to our moderator and distinguished speakers for an engaging and enlightening session. We will now take a short coffee break. Please be back by 4:20 p.m. here at Rizal Ballroom for Thematic Panel Discussion 4. Simultaneously, a special session entitled Dialogue with the Private Sector Enabling Impactful Public-Private Partnerships for Sustainable Development will take place at Rizal Ballroom C. May we kindly request all speakers for Thematic Panel Discussion 4 to please join us on stage. Once again, we would like to ask all the speakers for Thematic Panel Discussion 4 to get ready and join us on stage. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, we will now begin our final session for today on Thematic Panel Discussion 4, New Generation Partnerships with the UN Development System. Simultaneously, a special session entitled Dialogue with the Private Sector with the theme Enabling Impactful Public-Private Partnerships for Sustainable Development will take place at Rizal Ballroom C. The moderator of this thematic panel discussion is Honorable Maria Teresa Almojuela, Assistant Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines.
Good afternoon. We are beginning this panel entitled New Generation Partnerships in the UN Development System. And we are proud to have with us a distinguished set of panelists, beginning with Mr. David McLachlan-Carr, who is the Regional Director for Asia Pacific, UN Development Coordination Office. He has oversight of 25 resident coordinators, covering 43 countries in the Asia Pacific. We also have 2 resident coordinators from our region, Mr. Dirk Wagener, the UN resident coordinator in Fiji, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. Welcome. And Ms. Gita Sabharwal, the UN resident coordinator in Indonesia. And of course, we also have the pleasure of listening to colleagues, permanent representatives from New York, who will share with us their perspectives as middle-income countries. And I will begin with His Excellency Mr. Neville Gertze, the permanent representative of Namibia to the UN in New York. Welcome, Excellency. And His Excellency Mr. Brian Wallace, permanent representative of Jamaica to the UN in New York. I think we've heard since this morning much about the vital role, the criticality of middle-income countries in development, and one of the speakers at the scene setter said that MICs are where development is actually happening, and that many of the SDG and climate action goals will depend on, will rise or fall in the middle-income countries depending on their growth trajectories and how we assist them. And also that over half of the world population are residing in middle-income countries. I think it's good to reflect on the Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. This is a tool, the blueprint for partnerships between the UN and countries. And my office, the Office of the UN International Organizations in the Department of Foreign Affairs, has been working with our development department to frame this, to shape this. We had some months of negotiations and consultations, and we finally had a very good outcome document which was signed in the presence of the President. So this blueprint, which is in effect now, 2020, from 2024 last year up to 2028, is a blueprint for what we imagine as a new generation partnership. You know, it sets very high ambitions for achieving more scale and synergy, and also impact and efficiency in the UN development system in the Philippines. But I would like to share that my office actually, before we started and during our consultations with the UN on this document, we studied SDCFs of 19 other countries with the UN. And it was a very informative exercise for me and my team and our colleagues from the then NEDA, because it was very obvious, it was clear that there was recognition from countries on the critical role of the UN in being a catalyst for growth and transformation. We recognize, of course, and it's been pointed out earlier, that there are 29 countries that have graduated from low income to middle income, 29 countries in the past 15 years, and also that there are 34 countries that have graduated from the middle to high income categories in the past 2 decades. And I think that speaks much about the support that the UN development system has given to make these transitions possible. And I think this is very much the heart of our conversation. So, but the documents that we studied, 19 countries, also showed that there were different approaches depending on the priorities of the countries. And I think the product of our consultations with the UN, which we call the SDCF, identifies 3 strategic outcomes for the Philippines. And I think this is our contribution, of course, to this trend of framing new generation partnerships. What does it mean? And for the Philippines, I think, and in the course of the conversation this morning, we understand new generation partnerships to be informed by several factors. One is, of course, that we have a reformed UN development system. No? This is a work in progress. This is something that we made sure was in the middle of our consideration in bearing our expectations for the UN development system. We also have focused approaches and a very strong anchor on the principles of national ownership, accountability, transparency, and inclusion. And our credit to our representatives coming all the way from New York. I think the QCPR resolution has given a lot of guidance to many countries, including the Philippines, in shaping the SDCFs on the ground. And of course, we also have identified a very important factor, which is especially lately, especially now, where you see that the traditional resourcing models, the financing models are different. You see more of the role of domestic financing, private capital, but also IFIs and multilateral development banks. So new factors in a new generation partnership. Would really like to learn from how the UN development system is moving along these changes, these new factors, and also how MICs are appreciating these changes and what does new generation partnership mean for MIC. So I'd like to, before I invite David, our first panelist, to speak, we are going to present a video. And this is going to be an exciting video. It was prepared by the UN Philippines and the UN Development Coordination Office, Regional Office, that's David. And it showcases stories and best practices of new generation partnerships between the UN and national governments around the world. Let's see, I think it's a very good video to kick off our panel as we begin to listen to our panelists. May I ask our colleagues to play the video, please? May I ask the technical team if we're supposed to listen to some audio? Thank you very much for that. Don't worry, we will be receiving copies of a compilation of good stories in the region and outside, the support of the development system. This document will be available outside the room after this panel. So we begin with some remarks from David McLachlan-Carr.
Thank you very much, Maria Teresa. And let me once again thank the government of the Republic of the Philippines for hosting this incredibly important event. And also just to note, it's so good to see so many permanent representatives here with us who have always been champions of UN reform, but also, along with the Philippines, but also so actively engaged in this very interesting dialogue. If I may, Maria Teresa, listening to the conversation this morning, it has been very, very rich, but my key takeaways are that, firstly, middle-income countries are vital engines for global development, as you've mentioned yourself. They face complex evolving challenges that require equally dynamic and tailored support. To build on this support, we need to create a new generation of partnerships that are both strategic, catalytic, and fully aligned with national ambition. And I would include this includes civil society, this includes the private sector, along with governments and donor partners, and the UN system working together as a team, and certainly not competing for resources. But it's also one size does not fit all. I think that's also been very clear in the different trajectories of middle-income countries. We're seeing, some incredibly dynamic economic hubs to climate-vulnerable small island developing states. And they mix themselves, middle-income countries, but they all have different opportunities and challenges that need to be addressed. So therefore, we need to tailor-make solutions to fit this diversity. And I think, however, one thing is very true, is that traditional models of support, the classic Western-oriented ODA approach is no longer fit for purpose. So that were my key takeaways from the discussion. And then my overlay was to look at the Rabat Declaration and the incredibly active role of the Kingdom of Morocco in this space and hosting the first international conference. But one of the things I think is, how do we look at the Makati Declaration, the Rabat Declaration, and how then do the UN's models of partnership, financing and support, how should they evolve in this new context, matching the scale, speed and complexity of national aspirations? And I know the Philippines itself under the leadership of His Excellency, the President, has really wants to drive that ambition beyond the rhetoric to move quickly into a higher plane, if I may, of development. So 4 key areas that we've seen is we need to recognize the evolving development needs and also recognize that the vulnerability of mix cannot be measured by income alone. That was very, very clear also by the colleague from the World Bank and the ADB. The Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, however, does offer a much richer, I think, understanding of the fragility of these countries, climate change, economic shocks, and systemic inequalities. And therefore, as I mentioned earlier, partnerships must be tailored, forward-looking, and resilience-centered. Secondly, if we look at how do we engage mix, we need to look at a new generation of partnerships. The cooperation frameworks have been mentioned. Thank you very much, Maria Teresa, for mentioning that. But as a roadmap in each of the middle-income countries for developments signed with the government, nationally owned, they are vehicles to deliver higher impact developments. And they're also focused on SDG acceleration. I think the SDG acceleration benchmarking is a very good tool to see where we're going, but it also shows the potential. And a couple of examples that were given, unfortunately, it was a rather quick presentation. I'm not sure that everybody could see it, but in Indonesia, for example, Gita will come on in a minute, but you know, the UN has supported innovative financing that's mobilized over US $11 billion through green sukuks, through Islamic financing, which demonstrates catalytic partnerships. Chile, the UN has evolved from a traditional provider of aid to a strategic partner of normative and policy guidance. And the Dominican Republic, which I know is here, an integrated national financing framework now links over 95% of public expenditure to the SDGs in the DR, showcasing systemic financial alignment, which I think is real value added. Third area is scaling innovation and the digital transformation. None of this will succeed if we leave the digital transformation, which is one of the 6 transitions identified by the General Assembly for SDG acceleration. In Mongolia, digital initiatives are reaching more and more citizens, half of them women, demonstrating how technology can close development gaps. Even in landlocked settings, in Pakistan, the Energy Transition and Investment Plan showcases the UN's ability to convene diverse stakeholders around shared green development pathways. So digital public goods, innovative finance, and public-private collaboration must become standard features in our cooperation frameworks and our offer to middle-income countries. And finally, we must strengthen regional and multilateral cooperation. I think we're looking more and more at the UN system to working across typologies, countries of similar development trajectory, to be able to have solutions exchange and exchange best practices, what works and what doesn't. And that's the inherent value of this conference, of having middle income, like-minded countries sit down and look at what's working and what's not. So across the Asia-Pacific region, and has been mentioned many, many times, this South-South cooperation and regional cooperation platforms become increasingly important. Therefore, I think the real value and the power of regional solutions for shared challenges is so important. So, before I end, let me just say there's a shared call to action by the UN system to work with particularly countries in this region, the majority of which are middle income, to align our partnerships with national vision, moving from fragmented projects across the agency's funds and programs to truly transformative programs. Secondly, to scale up innovative financing, digital transformation, and resilience building as core enablers. And thirdly, to position the UN as a strategic, responsive, and catalytic partner, supporting MIC leadership through upstream policy advice and less down in the weeds of project implementation. And I think that that's our offer. It's the spirit of the reform, and we certainly hope to deliver better for MICs going forward. So with that, I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. I think you made a good point about the standard features, in all these sustainable development frameworks that that serve as a blueprint for your cooperation with countries, but also that you are very clear about supporting countries across 6 transitions. And a very good point about supporting them and developing solutions according to typologies. I think this is something that's very clear in our conversation about making solutions targeted and focused, and I think some of the discussions on development cooperation, including most recently in SCAP, has been about this. So we now will ask Mr. Dirk Wagener, the UN Resident Coordinator in Fiji, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu, to share with us some of his views on how UN supports these countries given their dual classification as small island developing states, as well as middle-income countries. What are the best practices that have been coming out of this region that you can share in this panel before this audience? And what is the role of resident coordinators in facilitating whole of UN responses to Pacific middle-income countries, given their unique challenges, including the need to build climate resilience? I think we have a colleague from Fiji with us, I think, and other similarly placed countries in the region would learn much from how we are bridging the development needs of our UN agencies, and also to consolidate the work of so many agencies in the Pacific. And how do we support that, processes to make sure that the SDCFs are truly responsive to the needs of the Pacific Islands? Please, Dirk.
Thank you so much, Madam. How many hours do I have? No, look, I wanted to maybe start by inviting all of you on a little journey into the reality of the Pacific small island development states, because we had a lot of discussion about no one size fits all, and also the need to move beyond GDP. And I wanted to start by, giving you a little bit of a feel of some of those key challenges that are faced by the Pacific small island developing countries. Firstly, we have the so-called development paradox. Most of the Pacific Island countries are middle-income countries classified, but they still experience a very high level of vulnerability, be it a climate change, sea level rise, geographic isolation, lack of market access, having small markets themselves, constrained labor market, and they're extremely prone to natural disasters. Some of the Pacific Island countries are the most exposed to natural disasters and also economic shocks. As I said, most of the Pacific Island countries, most of the SIDS are actually middle-income countries, except of Palau, which has recently actually moved into the high-income status. But paradoxically, we have 3 Pacific middle-income country classified countries that are still categorized as least developed countries. So we have Solomon Islands, Kiribati, and Tuvalu. And Tuvalu is actually sometimes classified as an upper middle-income country. So you have an upper middle-income country sits least developed country, right? So it's a triple classification, and I think it explains already some of the paradox. Most of the Pacific Island countries, most of the SIDS are highly dependent on remittances and aid, and also on fishing licenses. It's between 20 to 80% of the national revenue is generated through fishing licenses, and there's literally no downstream processing. So most of it is basically just income from selling those licenses. 2 more facts I have, which are quite interesting, and that's again related to the impact that natural disasters can have. Some of you may recall that there was a very strong volcano eruption in Tonga in 2022, and it triggered a tsunami. And that tsunami wiped out more than 1/3 of the country's GDP, just in 2 hours. And then lastly, a fact which I wanted to mention, and that's a research that is fairly recent. Sea level rise in the South Pacific is double the rate than elsewhere in the world. Since 1992, we have a sea level rise of about 15 centimeters in the South Pacific, which is double than what we've seen elsewhere in the world, mainly due to gravitational forces. But 50% of all the critical infrastructure of all the small island development states is within 500 meters of the shoreline. So depending now into which model you look, we look into 50 centimeter sea level rise up to 1 meter sea level rise by end of the century. And that means all that infrastructure would need to be shifted or rebuilt and need to be climate proofed. And the investments that are necessary for that they will go into the trillions. I think it's not been calculated yet. So what are we doing? And I wanted to actually start also by mentioning some of the global initiatives we are doing to put the interest of small island development states in the center of attention. And one of them, and I think the PRs who are here from New York, they know very well that we've strongly advocated for the adoption of the multidimensional vulnerability index, right? Because using GDP or GNI alone to classify a country and then to define whether that country gets concessional finance or not, that is a measurement that is completely outdated, right? We need to take the vulnerability of countries into account to define whether they have access to grants or concessional finance. And then, of course, we have the global CITS platform, the Antigua and Barbuda Action Plan, which now serves as a platform for us to help CITS make their voice heard and make sure that their specific needs are factored into global development planning. So what do we do at the country level? And you've asked us for some of the examples. I think one of the examples has been shown in the introduction. Of course, our support is very tailored, and it doesn't apply to any small island development state. In my portfolio, I cover Fiji, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. Tuvalu has a population of 9,000 people, and Fiji has a population of close to 1 million people. So obviously, what's very important, and my director has also said it in his introductory remarks, we need to tailor the support we are providing. In Tuvalu, we help the country with projects to reclaim and elevate land because the island is literally sinking. But of course, the availability and existence of land mass is also connected to the exclusive economic zone out of which the country receives much of its revenue. So the country has to survive, the country wants to survive, the people are very attached to their culture. So we help basically to elevate the whole island so it can survive in the future. In Fiji, which has a completely different economic situation, we help develop blended finance mechanisms together with the Fiji Development Bank and the private sector to turbocharge the blue economy sector, to bring MSMEs to a stage where they have viable business models, and then we provide loan guarantees to be able to create a viable private sector that is sustainable. I could give many other examples, but I just wanted to highlight, some of those issues that are important. You've asked me a few more questions, sort of what's the role of the resident coordinator, and especially in a multi-country context. Obviously, the resident coordinator's main job is to make sure that the UN delivers as one and that it delivers a coherent, consistent support against the national and regional development priorities. And I say regional because we have a regional cooperation framework in the Pacific covering 14 countries and territories shared among 3 multi-country offices. And we also have the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, which is the strategy of the regional cooperation entity, which is the Pacific Island Forum. And everything we do, of course, has to closely align to those regional plans. We are central to making the UN greater than the sum of its parts, I would claim. I will be judged by others whether we will be able to deliver on that, but we act as a convener, not only to bring together the UN agencies, but also to bring, obviously, together the governments, the civil society, the academia, the private sector, to develop an offer that responds to the specific country needs and that provides joint programs that address the needs at a much more strategic level. And of course, one of our key focus areas is to move away from what we call the tyranny of projects. As you may know, in the old UN system, so many small projects, so many donors fund a little initiative here or there, But whenever we talk to governments, they say, we don't need those little piecemeal interventions. We want joined up, larger joint programs that respond to our need at a systemic and more strategic level. That's why we are promoting pooled fund instruments, where we can pool resources, and rather than having them tightly earmarked, we can respond to some of the specific needs. And of course, we also promote and support homegrown financing mechanisms, especially among the Pacific SIDS. There is a lot of frustration around accessing climate finance. Mechanisms such as the GCF and others are seen as too cumbersome, taking too long, and not giving enough flexibility. And that's why the Pacific Island Forum countries have now agreed on their own financing facility, which is a Pacific Resilience Facility. The very last point you mentioned, I think, is how can the cooperation framework be tailored that it best reflects those priorities of the countries we cover. And I would say every cooperation framework is by its very design intended to be tailored to the country context. There is no one size fits all. So what we do is, of course, we take the evidence base, we do what we call a common country assessment. I'm sure that term is familiar to some of you, where we really look at the data and evidence and then make sure that we come up with a cooperation framework that is tailored, that is specific enough. In the case of the Pacific, because we cover 14 countries and territories, we have also something that we refer to as a country implementation plan. So each of those 14 countries and territories has a specific plan where the regional cooperation framework is translated into specific country action, and that is jointly managed between the respective government and the UN country team and other partners. I leave it here, maybe. I'm happy to obviously go into more detail in case there's follow-up question, but I think I wanted to provide a summary and touch upon all the points you raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dirk. Very good examples coming from DCO on, especially for Pacific, in terms of supporting regional priorities and new funding mechanisms. You talked about the Pacific Resilience Fund, and of course we are very interested to see how you are helping develop these more regional initiatives. So maybe you can share that with us later. Also a good point, which I think many countries will welcome, avoiding the tyranny of projects and going more into synergy, scale, and consolidation. But also, very importantly, you cited the importance of looking at the diverse challenges of these countries. They are SIDS, but some of them are lower income and some of them are upper middle income, high income. And of course, the big factors of ensuring disaster and climate resilience, which are really important and critical shock factors that we should consider in supporting the Pacific. Especially, of course, there have been some high-level discussions in New York on sea level rise, and sea level rise is considered as a slow onset disaster, and it's important for us to consider this in our support for Pacific countries. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Our next speaker will be Ms. Gita Sabharwal, UN Resident Coordination in Indonesia. She is in charge of coordinating 23 UN agencies in a very big country, the fourth most populous country in the world, 281.2 million people, 17,508 islands, 38 provinces, 98 cities, and 416 regencies. How easy is it, Gita, to achieve coherence and coordination in a country where the development work is at such a big scale like Indonesia's? Please share with us how the UN country team has adopted its partnership approach to effectively support the national priorities, but also in ensuring coordination. Ms. Gita.
Thank you. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Ambassador Wallace and Ambassador Gertz, along with my UN colleagues. I think it's a great opportunity to be discussing the new generation of UN partnerships with middle-income countries as they, on a very ambitious development trajectory of being a developed nation. Obviously, I'm going to speak from the perspective of Indonesia, where I serve as the resident coordinator. And I want to start off by setting in very broad strokes how I see middle-income country contexts. Typically, middle-income countries across the world demonstrate clarity of vision, purpose, and ambition, right? And in support of their forward-leaning agenda, they tend to leverage their deep private sector, their institutional capacities, right? And their evolving capabilities to their comparative advantages for being a developed nation, right? At the same time, we also see mix demonstrating different stages of development which require long-term government investments for bridging the development divide, while also meeting aspirations of young people with an agile and responsive policy systems. Now, in this context, it's very critical for the UN to be extremely strategic and focused to add value to the development agendas of middle-income countries. In the context of Indonesia, the one thing that we have done is to fully align behind national development priorities and plans as articulated in the 5-year plan of the government, the 20-year long-term strategy, and the Astachata, where the president has clearly articulated that he's looking for energy security, food security, investments in human capital development, along with 8% GDP growth, right? So that's the vision that we are aligned behind. Our cooperation framework, what you call, Maria, the blueprint, this allows for that uniformed UN country team approach. So as the country team, we make sure that we are aligned behind the priorities that are set out. We deliver to these priorities by bringing to bear 3 things. We bring top-level expertise, science-backed solutions, which are extremely critical in a middle-income country context, and innovative financing to turbocharge the country's green, just, and inclusive transformation that Ibu Rina had also spoken of in the previous session. In support of these transformations, I also feel, and this is a point that you raised about tyranny of projects, we cannot align ourselves behind projects. We need to align behind government programs and budgets in a way that we can incorporate the SDG accelerators into government programs. And we are doing that in Indonesia. The Indonesian government has a rice insurance mechanism that reaches 500,000 people. So as the UN system, we are working very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Food Agency to see how we can incorporate sustainable rice production practices as part of this insurance mechanism. So you suddenly get the turbocharging of SDGs, right? Because it's not a project, it's a government program that we are fully aligned behind. I also want to take this opportunity to speak to the point that David had raised about innovative financing. I believe this should be one metric of success of the UN, right? In a middle-income country context, where financing gaps can be pretty large, right? And in the context of Indonesia, it's close to $1.7 trillion, right, for meeting the SDGs. You cannot be relying on development financing to bridge this gap, right? You need to work with the private sector. You need to work with capital markets, both domestic and international. And in the context, again, of Indonesia, we work very closely with the Ministry of Finance And we are leveraging the SDG bonds, the green bonds, the blue bonds, the green sukuks that David mentioned, mobilizing close to, as of January 2025, close to $11.6 billion. And these go for specific projects, irrigation-related projects, marine conservation-related projects, scholarships for students across vulnerable population groups, for sustainable transportation, and they obviously offer scale. And you know, together over the past 4 years, we've reached close to 42 million people across the country through these bond mechanisms. I also want to very quickly speak to the adaptive partnerships that we need to bring to bear in a middle-income country context. As the UN, we convene and engage with national development banks, right? The 5 or 6 that we engage with have a capital of close to $123 billion. And we bring top-level technical expertise to help them develop their sustainable plans to move their financing in the direction of ESG. And this can unlock big sums of money that MICs need. MICs need this kind of money for meeting their development ambition, right? So with every single percentage point that we shift in the direction of ESG for the in support of the green transition, we are unlocking something like $1.23 billion, right? So these are the kinds of, you know, it's these new kind of partnerships that we want to be bringing to bear in the context of MICs. There was one other point that I want to speak to. It's about this whole thing of how do you couple climate action with energy transition for accelerating the net zero targets, which becomes even more essential in a MIC context, because without MICs delivering on this, you're not going to meet the global aspiration of 1.5 degrees, right? And as part of this, the UN, we work in partnership with government, investing in smart grids, right, and smart control centers, which are extremely critical to the whole energy transition game, right? We also focus on the last mile approach. Last year, together with the private sector, we worked with communities to set up 22 solar plants, power plants, right, in remoter parts of the islands, managed by communities, managed by women themselves. Right? We also invest in green skills, which is critical because upskilling agenda becomes, as you move in the direction of the green transition, you need the skills to back up the green transition, right? So we are working on that whole upskilling agenda for this transition. And let me very quickly speak to a very interesting example. Blue economy becomes critical, right? Your green and blue need to go hand in hand. In the context of Indonesia, you've got 2.5 million small boats, right? All running on fuel. We are currently piloting with the private sector to see how we can help them introduce solar panels for these boats, right? So that the engines become hybrid. It's a simple solution. It reduces costs for the fishermen first and reduces emission, right, for the country as a whole. So it's a win-win situation. And if we get this blended financing instrument right, we can actually demonstrate that how prosperity and sustainability can go hand in hand for the country and for the people, right? So these are some of the ways that we are working together with government. And I want to end on the role of the RC, and I know Dirk spoke to that as well. I feel, that RCs can only be as effective as the partnerships that they foster. And these are partnerships of trust that you need to foster with government, with private sector, with civil society. Without these partnerships, we are pretty ineffective, right? I also feel that as RCs, we need to be very smart in positioning of the UN country team. We want to create new entry points. We want to make sure that our value add, the value add that we are bringing with the technical expertise and the financial resources is actually helping the acceleration agenda, right? And we also want to be leveraging this deep and diverse skill sets of the UN family. The UN family is large, and we have the skill sets, right? It's a question of bringing those skill sets to bear for the country context. So I want to end by saying that, that we as the RCs stand at the heart of these broad-based partnerships, which mix need, right? The middle-income countries need this for their own, to meet their own development ambition. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Geeta. I was so happy to hear, of course, how the UNRC system is delivering, because as diplomats, we've been following discussions in New York on the reform development system for the past decade. And I think from what I hear from the resident coordinators in Indonesia and the Pacific, and of course, David, it looks like there's more clarity about your role. I know we imagined when we were negotiating the language for defining the work of the RC that it would be a very difficult job. It is, but it's looking more like we have clarity in terms of the role of the RCs in positioning the UN system, and then also strengthening coordination. You mentioned that there are the UN has many resources that we can leverage to support middle-income countries, but I think my key takeaway from the first three panelists is that we're quite clear about what new generation partnerships mean. If we have metrics to judge the success of the UN development system, it would be number one, that we have long-term solutions, less projects approach, but more systemic, strategic, programmatic approach. Of course, going for scale rather than small projects. I think a good metric for success that you mentioned, you identified would be how well we are innovating financing, how we are developing new instruments and business models, and also another metric is how we are able to frame and develop adaptive partnerships. And I think you have explained very well what this means. Of course, a last good point about considering the success of the UN development system is whether we are able to tie up the nexus of climate resilience, green transitions, upskilling, and weaving them into the development, the transformation that we seek to achieve in these countries. And I think we have very clear metrics. And I think this is what I've heard so far from our three panelists. We will now listen to perspectives from our permanent representatives coming from New York. We will begin with Mr. Neville Gertze from Namibia. Namibia, of course, has achieved steady growth in the past years, a middle-income country. But I'd like in particular to refer to Ambassador Gertze the question about how in the case of Namibia, is the UN managing a gradual shift from a traditional model of directly supporting and providing service of assistance towards a greater emphasis on integrated high-quality policy advice, strengthening institutions and capacity development, and support for leveraging partnerships and financing. So I think there's been some very clear language in UN resolutions about shifting the kind of services provided by our UN partners to our countries. We'd like to know, Ambassador Excellency, about how this shift is happening in Namibia in particular, and what are the kinds of strategies and solutions that have been successful in Namibia. It's difficult to, of course, engineer shifts like this, but I think the engagements that we have show that there's a lot of space. I think the Asian stories, the good stories from Asia show that there are solutions. We'd like to hear also about how your cooperation with the UN development system allows for ensuring transparency, accountability, and national ownership for UN projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. And as a former chief of protocol in Namibia, I am happy to see that one of my lessons when organizing these events is still true today, when there is always Murphy's Law involved. I was supposed to be seated here, it seems, but I'm happy to play musical chairs today. And so let me speak for Namibia, not for Jamaica. Yes, thank you. I think one of the starting points in responding to your question should be, for me, where are we coming from and where are we heading? Namibia is only 35 years old now. One of the advantages of being young at this age is we became independent at a time when many countries had already gone far in terms of their experience with the UN system. And so we were able to take away some of the shortcomings, maybe some of the challenges that others had had earlier, and so we could basically start midway to already take on board new ways of doing things. And I think that has helped to establish a very strong, productive relationship with the UN system, and particularly with the representation in Namibia. So that traditional relationship of an aid model that was there before, where basically the UN came in and provided solutions, is no longer the case in our case today. Today we have a very strategic partnership of cooperation with the UN on the ground that enables us to develop own capacity with the help of the UN system, so that there is transfer of skills and technology and support from the UN presence in the country. So we have a very strategic cooperation that assists us with policy advice, institutional strengthening, and collaborative partnerships. And these partnerships in particular has brought focus on inclusivity, bringing the private sector on board, looking at what we can gain from the input from civil society, and making it a process where the UN representation facilitates this input from the various sectors of society to strengthen government policies and the implementation thereof. So we are guided strongly by the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation framework model now that makes it possible for us to benefit from UN capacity in supporting the development of our national development plans and to streamline it with our Vision 2030 to become a developed country. Of course, we have to take into consideration, as I said, the background of our country. We have become independent at a time when we were already classified as a middle-income country and subsequently became an upper middle-income country, and yet we are still today the second country in the world with the highest Gini coefficient. In other words, upper middle-income country, but with a huge income inequality. So that by and large, Namibia is still a poor country because the majority of the population is still poor. And so that challenge remains with us to find solutions in trying to build quick solutions to fast-track the economic development and integration of all of the citizens in or through strengthened partnerships. And of course, it's no good to fight now to still be poor or to be reclassified as a least developed country. Rather, take what are the advantages that we have through this classification as an upper middle income country. And I think this is where I'd like to just bring in quickly the work that we have done in the last 2 years with the negotiations for the adoption of the Pact for the Future, where we've highlighted in particular the challenges that middle-income countries are facing. Those are the reforms required in the financial services sector in helping us fast-track the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I must say I'm a little bit taken aback that for the whole day I haven't heard one word said about the importance of the Pact for the Future, as it is really the blueprint that we will follow towards lifting people out of poverty. That remains still a key objective of most of us, even though we may already be middle-income countries. Brian was part of that exercise, and I'm sure he'll be speaking about the outcomes on the Declaration on Future Generations, which was part of our discussions. Now, within Namibia, the examples are many. The engagement through UNDP's role in helping us with the accelerator labs that we are running in Namibia is of immense value, as it brings support to doing research on the ground, getting input and data and statistics from the people on the ground. So whether it's in agriculture towards food and food security, we are able now to get advice out to farmers on how to protect or prepare themselves against climate change effects, whether it's droughts, whether it is floods, and that has now given them tools to increase their food production despite the adversities that they're faced with. Similarly, with informal sector, we've been seeing through the accelerator program how that is helping, giving input now from informal traders to urban planning for how to incorporate the informal sector into driving the national economy. We also have examples of where through UN Women, for example, the strengthening of our programs towards gender equality and improving the role of the girl child in education and so on. That has seen tremendous success already. And of course, we are working very closely now with UN agencies supporting us in the transition to renewable energy sources. In particular, green hydrogen has become a very strong focus area in Namibia. And there we are also now seeing last week the new president of Namibia inaugurating the opening of the first green hydrogen-driven iron ore production plant. And that is all due to this interaction and cooperation that we have from UN agencies. I'll stop here and then perhaps we can give more details later on. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Yeah, I agree with you. We should talk more about the Pact for the Future. And of course, everybody here recognizes your excellent work as co-facilitator of that document. Let's give Ambassador Gertze a big hand. It was a very, very difficult work, but it was adopted in New York last year, and perhaps that's a point of conversation as we continue to imagine what the new generation partnership looks like, and also its focus. And thank you for sharing with us some of the approach of Namibia in defining a new generation partnership with the UN, including looking after integration and inclusion of your populations to make sure that they are very much in the middle of your transformation. Also, good points about using data and the approaches related to the informal sector and cooperation with women to empower women and girls. Thank you very much, Ambassador Gertze. We will now invite His Excellency Mr. Brian Wallace, Permanent Representative of Jamaica to the UN in New York, to share with us his insights on South-South cooperation. The Rabat Declaration stressed the importance of the role of South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation in addressing the development needs of middle-income countries, including through capacity building and fostering peer learning and sharing of best practices among MICs. So it will be, I think we'd like to see how this is being implemented, how this is incorporated in the practices, particularly in your region, the Caribbean. I think it's also a place where you have many middle-income countries, some of them upper middle income, which are also small island developing states. So you have these factors. We're also aware that Jamaica is a upper middle income country, but is still but has many challenges in sustaining and accelerating these gains of your development. So please tell us about the lessons you have learned in relation to your transition, but also in the value of South-South cooperation. Just to share here that the Minister of Health of the Philippines traveled to Jamaica at the beginning of this year to follow the visit of your health minister to the Philippines last year. And it's on the area of cooperation on sustainable health resources. And I think that speaks very much about how much we have to learn from each other as middle-income countries with similar challenges. Ambassador.
Thank you so much. And what you just said is an example of how small the world has become when we can foster that kind of very specific cooperation, oceans away. There was a time in the past when we would have been looking closer to home for that kind of cooperation. Now we can literally look across the world. And that's one of the areas that I think where South-South cooperation can really help us to thrive, not only as an economic activity, by using technology and by reducing that digital divide as an economic activity itself, but also to enhance our cooperation in other areas. But I think my task is the easiest of all of us here, because you've had the benefit of hearing the setting up of the framework, what it looks like now, how it operates. I have a lot of familiarity with what Dirk was saying. You mentioned that Jamaica is a small island developing state among other small island developing states in our region. And so the framework is already set. So I'm going to focus my comments on some actual examples of what the UN Development System is doing in Jamaica to foster that kind of South-South cooperation, particularly within the region and beyond. But before I do that, I just wanted to touch base on what the UN development system, because there is an elephant in the room. And that is that we are at a critical stage now in the history of multilateralism, where all of the priorities that we had set ourselves and that we thought were what we were working, what provided the framework for us to work towards the achievement of the SDGs, is now under stress. And it's going to require some effort for us to ensure that the priorities of countries like ours remain the priorities of the multilateral system. And it is not going to happen if we do nothing. So certainly one area of South-South cooperation is going to be in our advocacy for the strengthening of the UN development system, the resourcing, adequate and stable resourcing of the UN development system, something that our Deputy Secretary General has been advocating for consistently for a long period of time. Also our advocacy together as middle-income countries, as small island developing states, some of us, in ensuring that the means of implementation of all of the things that we say that we need to do becomes available in a more equitable, fair, and just way. That is through a reform of the international financial system. So I just wanted to set that, to say a few words on that contextually. And then just to turn to what's happening in our region, what's happening in Jamaica, what the UN development system is doing there. So as you have heard, the delivering as one approach from the UN Resident Coordinator Office in Jamaica is the thread that keeps us working together. There are several joint UN projects and programs which, because they work together so seamlessly, avoid duplication and maximize the targeting of what are, of course, limited resources. They've also developed regional partnerships for knowledge sharing and learning, with Jamaica in many instances being a pilot country for the rest of the sub-region. So let me just talk a little bit about some of what UNDP has been doing. So there is a social justice project that is funded by Global Affairs Canada. And that is designed to improve access to social justice services by creating a more rights-based and gender-sensitive justice system. It's designed to strengthen implementation of an integrated electronic case management system to improve storage and management of court records. And it's achieved through capacity building knowledge exchange study tour to Rwanda, learn best practices and processes. And this is assisting with institutional strengthening of the courts in our region. And again, this is a pilot project for the rest of the region. So it involves Canada, it involves Rwanda, it involves Jamaica, but it's also extending to the rest of CARICOM. There's also a Blue Resilience Project supported by Norway's Blue Justice Initiative. And this is to do several things, but includes combating fisheries crime. And I know fisheries is critical to this area as well. So 12 CARICOM member states joined under the Copenhagen Declaration to enhance institutional coordination. And it also promotes collaboration and an evidence-based approach to tackling organized crime and fisheries. The Blue Justice Caribbean Hub supports sharing of best practices, real-time fishing updates, and technical support via the Blue Justice Community Platform. And it improves regional resilience and governance in the blue economy. So that's UNDP. The IAEA, who would have thought that the Caribbean being a nuclear-free zone and a zone of peace would be collaborating with IAEA? But we do, because IAEA does more than just nuclear work. So there's a technical cooperation program which is designed to boost South-South cooperation in areas such as health and nutrition, water and the environment, food and agriculture, industrial applications, and nuclear knowledge development and management. So on human health, on areas of cancer research, treatment, and care, Jamaica is to serve as a regional center. On the agriculture and health, there's a project to strengthen national capacities for the introduction of the sterile insect technique for pest control, as well as on a self-contained gamma irradiation facility. and this is implemented by the International Center for Environmental and Nuclear Sciences. And this is designed to help with food security in our region, enhance capacity to meet export standards, so drivers of economic activity, and also to be used in vector control to get rid of mosquito-borne diseases. Training and capacity building activities as well. The FAO is also involved in things that are cross-regional and provide support, including an inclusive and resilient agri-food system in rural and peri-urban territories of Kingston. This is a project that is funded by the India UN Development Partnership Fund and implemented by FAO. And this is to foster sustainable agricultural practices and enhance community engagement. So those are some of the very practical examples of what the UN system, development system in particular, but the broader UN system as well, is doing in our region that brings in this triangular cooperation and South-South cooperation all at the same time.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Wallace. It's good to hear about, some of these projects. I think that illustrate the regional approach, the approach to learn from typologies, successful stories of the same types of countries with the same type of challenges, and also the range of actors in the development sphere. IAEA usually is seen to be more like nuclear security, but actually TC-wise, I think with the example you've mentioned, there is a lot of support that some countries are gaining from the IAEA expertise and facilities in terms of supporting food security and our capacities, including on export products, as you mentioned, and also on health. Thank you very much. We have, maybe we will allot 10 minutes for an open forum. May I ask, yes. So we have 2 questions, one from the lady from Mexico and also the gentleman from Ecuador to follow. Ma'am, you have the floor. To the technical team, may we please, Mexico and also Peru. Yes.
Thank you very much. Good evening to all, and thank you very much for the panelists and their insightful presentations. I have maybe a comment and a question. The first comment is the one that mentioned Ambassador Gertz and the importance of the Pact for the Future for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, and also to make the UN more effective for today's and our future challenges. I think it was a very important, or it is an important document that we have to work towards making sure that what that document said we can implement. We didn't do so well in terms of including middle-income countries in that document. I think we've got 2 mentions of them, and they are in a kind of a listing. But in any case, it wasn't our job to count how many times something was said in that document, but rather the way that it is said. In that same manner, we talked about multidimensional vulnerability index. One of the panelists mentioned it here today, and of course it is in the Pact for the Future. But taking into account the diversity of middle-income countries and the fact that at first the multidimensional vulnerability index was not necessarily made for middle-income countries, but there were several examples here today regarding how some middle-income countries are also small island development states. And so in that sense, how would you say that the multidimensional vulnerability index is relevant for middle-income countries, particularly those that are not SIDS, and how, and considering the immense diversity that middle-income countries present? Thank you very much.
Thank you. With the permission of the members of this panel, maybe I will take the questions first, and as we conclude, you may wish to address some of these questions. Our next in the list is our representative from Ecuador, to be followed by the representatives of Armenia and Peru. So, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and thank you to all the panelists for their very insightful briefings. I think all the interventions, I don't really have a question, it's more like a comment, but all the interventions definitely highlighted the vital role of the UN development system, and in particular the resident coordination system, the resident coordinator system in providing tailored support to middle-income countries. As the current president of the executive board of UNDP, UNFPA, and UNOPS, and during the ongoing development of the strategic plans of these three agencies, Ecuador has witnessed, I think, firsthand the commitment of the UN system to adopt its strategies to the evolving realities of countries in transition. Recognizing this, I think it's important to underscore the importance of meeting the long-standing ODA commitments, and also to emphasize the need to explore innovative financing mechanisms to sustainably support the resident coordinators system. Strengthening alternative financing solutions, I think it's critical to ensure that the UN system supports and remains flexible, predictable, and responsive to the evolving and complex needs of middle-income countries. Thank you.
Thank you. May we now call on the representative from Armenia.
Thank you, Madam Assistant Secretary. I have to commend the very eloquent choice of distinguished panelists, which allowed us to have a very targeted discussion. In fact, the discussion is moving around those middle-income countries which are also vulnerable, bearing in mind that they are either small island developing states, but also landlocked developing countries, just like my country. And it exacerbates the vulnerabilities which the middle-income countries already face. In this regard, I would like to add to our discussion one more component. As the distinguished resident coordinator mentioned, Mr. Wagner mentioned, very often the middle-income countries are not very satisfied with the small-scale projects. I would like to also add that very often the middle-income countries, the projects for middle-income countries lack a hard component. And when we ask, for instance, when Armenia asks why the UNRC, UN country team, proposes a project with only soft component, notably it can be training or consultancy or project development, strategy development, the answer is that, guys, you are middle-income country, so you are not eligible for hard component. For instance, capacity building or infrastructure development. This is another problem which needs to be rectified, and we need to draw attention of the UN system to this issue because, again, there is need for tailor-made approach to the programmatic cooperation with the middle-income countries based on their needs and priorities. If a middle-income country still is in need for infrastructure development or other hard components in the programmatic cooperation, it needs to be taken into account because not always we can simply be satisfied by small-scale projects which support us in, let's say, training of specialists or developing strategies without doing certain work which can make transformative changes on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, and may we please share the microphone with our colleague from Peru.
Thank you so much. I guess I'm probably going to voice something that has already been discussed and reflected upon. But I think we all know that we are facing huge challenges, I think, in the international arena, and especially considering, the policies announced by the most biggest contributor of the UN system. In this panel, we were talking precisely about the new generation partnership, isn't it, within the UN development system. And I just wanted to hear your opinion, your thoughts on how we could face, those challenges in a context in which, uncertainty has really, multiplied, and in which multilateralism is being openly questioned. And, there's increasing protectionism. And of course, the rules-based order, especially the international economic order, has been, is no longer upheld by its main previous defender. So I would really, like very much to know your thoughts on that and how MICs could work together with the UN system, to face these huge challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, our colleague from El Salvador. And from Lebanon.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and thank you very much for the distinguished panelists that have been participating in this important session. I just wanted to take some of the words by the distinguished ambassador of Namibia in terms of the Pact for the Future. Even though that, for example, middle-income countries were not specifically addressed or tackled in the Pact for the Future, and it has to do with the different contexts of the negotiations. One of the most important commitments that we were able to agree as member state, it was the Beyond GDP process, which has been a big request from middle-income countries in terms of agreeing on establishing an expert group that can define such measurements, and then also an instrumental process that can also find a way of agreeing on such. And I think that also goes in line with the discussions on MBI, on how, for example, MBI can be used as one of the tools or indicators that will inform what it will be, the Beyond GDP discussion, that it will be a little bit more broader in terms of what it entails. So just to touch that point in terms of the Pacts for the Future. And lastly, I think it is important now that we're talking about the UNDS and its support for the middle-income countries, and not to forget the mandates that were agreed on QCPR. On QCPR, there are relevant mandates, mainly on the system-wide strategy for middle-income countries, which has been also a request for the system to have a strategy to support middle-income countries. And that's also something that it can be a relevant mandate, of course, to be defined in a more global arena, but then to also to be implemented nationally with the country programs and the cooperation framework that is designed with the system. So it's important maybe to connect some of these dots that are more in the global discussion, like for example, the Pact for the Future or QCPR, that can also transcend to specific actions in the national level. Thank you.
Thank you, our colleague from Lebanon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank the panelists for their very insightful remarks and for the presentation that are very cross-regional from different parts of the globe. And we're so glad to be hearing about experiences from many countries. And actually, it's very funny because my colleague from El Salvador actually said what I wanted to say when it comes to the QCPR and how it's very important to acknowledge the importance of having these mandates for the mix. And in the same line, maybe I would just add that the QCPR also resolution that was adopted last year mentioned how we need to take into account the specific challenges and needs of the middle-income countries. And just on a side note, when it comes to the Pact for the Future, it's true that middle-income countries were tackled as regional, as groupings. They didn't have a specific paragraph when it comes to middle-income countries, but we also have one of the commitments that is strengthening the UN development system and resident coordinator system. In this line, I would like just to add that, as was also mentioned by Armenia today, that the resident coordinator system needs to be aligned behind the national priorities, as also the resident coordinator from Indonesia was presenting in her remarks. In this regard, I would like to know how can we, the resident coordinator offices in middle-income countries, as we know many middle-income countries have resident coordinators like my country, like Lebanon too. How they can be equipped with adequate profiles and the tools, and how they can respond to challenge when it comes to knowing what are the priorities and what are the real needs on the floor, specifically when it comes also to implementation of the projects and how they need to shift the project according to the circumstances in countries, especially when it comes to external shocks or like some challenges, like let's say for like conflicts, like it happened in my country last year. And I would like to thank again all the panelists for their very insightful presentations, and thank you again for also Madam Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. This is working. So we're going a bit over time. So with your indulgence, I'm going to perhaps allot 10 minutes for the last remarks. We've heard questions on multidimensional measures and the current process in New York, the working group to discuss this. Perhaps I can ask Ambassador Goetze to answer this question. We also have questions on the resourcing of the UN development system. I think you mentioned this, Ambassador Wallace. Perhaps you can address this. Also, very important questions, perhaps our colleagues from the UN development system can address. Are we resourcing the UN system enough? Are we preparing you to provide the services that some of the General Assembly resolutions have mandated you to do under the QCPR, including providing high-quality policy advice, strengthening institutions, capacity development, and how we're able to, are we supporting your work in developing new value propositions for countries in transition, and also a question from Mexico on how do we make sure that the UN development system is able to perform optimally and weather these transformation and shifts that we are experiencing in the global space right now. So we will begin with Ambassador Goetze. Thank you.
Thank you. You can tell from the questions on the floor, those who have asked them, that they were intimately involved in the negotiations of the Pact for the Future. I know them as the rascals in the room, but making it extremely possible for us, in fact, invaluable input in us reaching the outcomes that we did. Of course, one of the outcomes we had secured there was the focus on measures beyond GDP. And of course, this for us, particularly for my country, also covers then the concern around multidimensional vulnerability issues, such as drought, such as floods, such as also the issues around debt sustainability and how we deal with meeting the SDG implementation while servicing huge debts and being unable to have the resources that we need for that. We know the outcomes that all of us had when we all came out of COVID, that the realignment or the redirection of resources towards dealing with that then affected the implementation of the SDGs. And so for us, this is an incredibly important part that I'm hoping also now in the negotiations for FFD4, we will also find traction there that these are taken on board as well. Since we are not having as much time, I think we'll give others also a chance to speak.
Thank you. Just to follow up on what Neville said about the Pact for the Future as well, and just to remind, the Pact for the Future is an overarching framework document. It also has 2 annexes that are also relevant to middle-income countries. And it's not a question of how many times that phrase, middle-income countries, is mentioned in it, but rather how many issues that are very, very important to middle-income countries, how they are dealt with in the Pact itself, in the Global Digital Compact, and of course, if I do say so myself, in the Declaration on Future Generations. So there is a framework that member states have committed to that captures the interests and issues that are relevant to middle-income countries. In terms of the resourcing of the UN development system, let us be clear, and I'll blend 2 answers into one here. Let us be clear. There are not enough resources as things stand. There have not been enough resources for decades. That situation is not going to improve in the near future. It is going to get worse. I think that's predictable. So, folks who come from countries like Jamaica and Namibia, we are used to dealing with challenges. We don't see challenges as obstacles. We see them as hurdles to jump over. So what we're going to have to do now is to figure out how collectively we raise our voices to protect those areas that constitute our priority areas. That is going to be our task throughout the development system, throughout the international financial system over the next several years, because we're going to have to refocus. There's no question about that. The UN system itself is going to have to refocus. So let us not kid ourselves in thinking that there is going to be some change of heart and we're going to get manna from heaven. We have to be prepared to make difficult decisions about what we are prepared to give up in order to maintain what is critical for our development. And we need to start thinking about that quickly, and we need to find ourselves in a room where we can have complete solidarity among middle-income countries, among SIDS, and with triangular cooperation as well, to build partnerships with those who understand the importance of some of these issues, not only to middle-income countries, but also to themselves, to build up those partnerships so that we can raise our level of advocacy to protect what is important to us.
Thank you, Ambassador Wallace. And may I ask the resident coordinators from Indonesia and the Pacific Islands countries, maybe 2 minutes each to wrap up and to comment on some of those questions.
Thanks a lot, Maria. Maria, I want to conclude by going back to the point that you raised, the value proposition, right? Engineering this new value proposition will be informed and driven by member states. And in this context, middle-income countries. The asks of middle-income countries are getting clearer. And one of the big asks is for real-time digital solutions. And it's growing. I mean, the Global Digital Compact that you refer to, it's growing, right? Ibu Rina from Indonesia Aid earlier spoke about the role that Indonesia is playing in taking some of these digital solutions across other countries, not just in the Pacific, but across Asia, right? This is what we are going to see more of. As the UN, we are stepping into the space to work closely with the government to generate these digital solutions. We have the sea level rise modeling, digital modeling. We have an app for the Ministry of Health that allows tracking of vaccines, all vaccines in real time, the disposal of hazardous medical waste in real time. We are working very closely with the government using satellite imagery for real-time monitoring of rice production and harvest. So these kind of digital solutions are the asks of government, which we as the UN system are responding to. So I'm going to stop there, hand it over to Dirk.
Well, it's very difficult to add anything after what you said, Gita. It was so much to the point, but I wanted to just pick up on one or two more points. I think we have a unique chance here also to use this crisis to really evolve the UN into what it should be and to be fit for purpose. It's always been the question: are we fit for purpose to deliver on the SDGs? Are we fit for purpose to deliver on the Pact for the Future? You name it. I think we will see much more an orientation towards providing upstream policy advice and using the UN to leverage our capacities for transformational and catalytic change rather than getting lost in the implementation of projects. And I think I would personally say that's a good development. It will be a tough period of adjustment. It will be a period of tough discussions. But ultimately, again, it will be driven by you. It will be driven by the member states. And to some extent, we look to you to give us those guidance to make that transformational change. And I wanted to pick up on one point. I think the gentleman PR from Ecuador mentioned that he's currently having the chairmanship of the board of the agencies. And I'll try to be a little bit provocative now. First of all, does the UN really need 45 agencies, funds, and programs? That's a question we just need to dare asking. And then secondly, we have already a cooperation framework at the country level. Do we need CPDs that still go to agency boards? I have 23 agencies, funds, and programs resident in Suva. Each of those agencies has their own country program document, goes to the government, negotiates the country program document, and then gives it to some of their boards, be it your board or other boards. Is that really necessary? I think we have to look both ways, also in terms of the current governing mechanisms in place for some of the agencies. We can have huge efficiency gains, and there are so many steps that can be simply taken out, which are not needed anymore. Thank you.
I think Dirk has emboldened me. Ambassador Goertz, I'm feeling like a naughty schoolboy right now, not mentioning the Pact for the Future, because the Pact for the Future has really injected fresh blood into the aging corpse of multilateralism, and it's an incredibly significant document. We almost didn't mention it because it's so important, and it's such a good restatement of faith in multilateralism, but also the need for innovation, the need for engaging youth, the digitalization, innovative financing, all of the things that will make the UN survive. So apologies for that. I failed my exam. I'm feeling very naughty. But Dirk has also been very provocative in a sense. The quid pro quo, of course, is we're at this fiscal cliff, as and the ambassador of Jamaica has said, but nothing focuses the mind quite like a fiscal crisis. And the UN, quite frankly, is enormously fragmented. It duplicates on so many of its systems. I think a reform within the efficiencies that can be gained by the system working closer together is way overdue. And I think that one of the things behooves us, as the Secretary General promised at the beginning of the reform program, and a very focused, efficiency agenda that looks at common back offices, business operation strategies, common premises, the UN truly coming together is overdue and is absolutely necessary. And I think only then will the system really come together and provide the kind of upstream policy advisory services that member states, particularly middle-income countries, demand, will really come together, and we will become the knowledge network and the connector that is expected of the reform of the UN system. So I just wanted to add that, because we haven't talked about the operational side, but there's a lot that could be ploughed back into development from operational efficiencies that are being missed, and that we have a long way to go.
Thank you very much. Did you enjoy this panel as I did, as much as I did? I think it's been a very informative and constructive dialogue. I have no doubt, and I think the audience will agree that this panel has contributed immensely to the wealth and depth of discussions at this conference. We thank each one of the panel. I don't think we could have picked a better set of panelists in this session. We have benefited from the excellence and expertise of each of our panel members. Thank you very much. I think we come away from this session knowing that there are hard calls to make, hard times ahead, but this is nothing new. And the new generation partnerships that we are talking about will be shaped jointly by both the MICs and the UN Development System. So with that, may I invite you to please give a round of applause to our panel members. Thank you.
Thank you to our moderator and speakers for the engaging discussion. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes day one of the high-level conference of middle-income countries. Thank you for your active participation, valuable insights, and the rich exchange of ideas throughout today's sessions. We look forward to welcoming you at the welcome reception to be held at Isabella Room, 2 floors down at Basement 1 at 6:15 p.m. Once again, that's Isabella Room, 2 floors down, Basement 1 at 6:15 p.m. Thank you and have a pleasant evening.